Let's talk about it.
Hello and welcome back to Thicc Radio, the podcast where we talk about gaming and everything in its orbit. I'm James.
And I'm Tim, so let's get into it. James, what are we talking about today?
So today I thought it would be interesting if we talked about the kind of permission that a lot of people lean on when it comes to gaming. Because I don't know about you, I feel like a lot of us have this shared experience where it's like, you know that you want to gain, or you're sexually turned on by gaining. Maybe you're even that person who is like the quintessential lurker, quote unquote. And it's like, how do you just fucking do it? And I think we talked about this a little bit in the lurker episode. And I do think it comes down to this concept of permission. I think it comes down to this moment where just in your heart, mind, soul, wherever that decision-making process lies for you, you ultimately go, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to enjoy doing it, and I'm going to throw myself into this, and it's going to be great. And I think it would be interesting to talk about that specific moment, because it's different for everyone. Like, how was it for you? What was your moment?
So I came by mine a bit differently than I feel most gainers do. Like, I pretty much, well, not across the board or anything, but like a lot of gainers that I talk to, they're like, oh, I knew as a kid. I knew when I was a little kid, I used to stuff pillows under my shirt. I wanted to be a chubby person. I was always fascinated by it. I was a little bit different. I was always fascinated by chubby men, fat men, bellies, and all that. But I did not make the actual decision to start gaining until I was in my late 20s. I was about 28. And then it wasn't until 34 that I was like, okay, I'm actually being turned on by this. Because from 28 to 34, it was a little bit like, I don't know. Is this really working for me? Is this what I really want? I was small enough that I could have easily lost the weight if I didn't end up liking it. And I really freaking liked it. You know, fell in love with it really. And was like, no, this is it. This is my destiny. I have to go for this. So
I feel like I've shared my moment on the podcast before. It was that weird sex stream that wasn't a sex stream with like the sin of gluttony. Do you remember this?
Yeah, I remember you telling me about it.
Listeners, I don't know what episode it is, but if you remember it, you remember it. And if you don't, reach out to me on Instagram and I might regale you with the tale. But needless to say, after that dream, I woke up, I had to stuff myself stupid. And ever since then, there has just been this thing inside of me that just goes, more, I want more. And it's quite intense at times, the strength within which this voice, this inner caricature, comes out and takes over. It's almost funny to reflect on my life beforehand and think, God, what was my food efforts like? You know what I mean? How did I used to cook? How did I used to eat food and snack and just drink drinks? And now I'm sat here like, I'm having a cup of tea. Can I add more milk to this? Can I add cream? Can I add thickener? Can I add more sugar?
Does maltodextrin mix well with coffee? I don't know. Let's find out.
Can I add protein powder to this? Is there enough calories? How about some oil? How about some extra fat? How about some extra salt and flavor? Yeah,
no, you can't drink cooking oil, can you? No, that'd be terrible. Which, by the way, PSA, don't do that. But
yeah, I feel like we're at that point now where it's like, yeah, we joke and say, oh, a quarter cup of cooking oil, just like casually in your pasta, calories. Yeah, that's a good joke. But also, it will give you diarrhea. Do not do that to yourself.
See, the thing about oil is that it doesn't really go anywhere. It just slides right through you. So
yeah, you've seen food sliding out of the pan. Like, it makes sense that everything that's inside of you is going to go out the exact same way. So
it coats it like Teflon.
Exactly. So it's interesting to reflect on like that permission to gain and how that impetus really just kicks things not only into like an easing into it, right? Like, I don't know anyone who like really hit the impetus and like eased into gaining. I feel like everyone has that moment. And then it goes, and it's just like,
yeah, it's like you're standing on the edge of, you're on a diving board or on the edge of a cliff or whatever, and you know that once you finally make the leap, you won't be afraid anymore, and you'll land in the water, you'll splash around, you'll have an amazing experience, you'll have that adrenaline rush, I feel like that's how most of us arrive at that. This is what I'm doing now. I'm jumping off this damn diving board and I am going to do a perfect swan dive directly into this lake of fat.
100. And, to that point as well, of course, not everyone is going to be like throwing themselves into it in the exact same way. Obviously, not everyone's going to be going like gung-ho 24/7. Some of us, pointing at myself in this regard, don't have the genetics to like keep up with like non-stop, never-ending gaining calorific growth. Like, I had to truly spend my first period of gaining like teaching my 100-pound twink body that it can fit in more than half a cheeseburger from McDonald's. Like,
Yeah, I totally get that. I totally get that because it was kind of the same thing for me. It was like, and I'll admit that I still have an issue with being overly full to the point of like if it's painful because then I get nauseous. And I really don't like feeling full and nauseous because then like, well, okay, what if I throw up? I undo all the work that I just did.
no, I totally get that. But then here's the real question. You know the moment in your personal history where you hit that impetus, that moment of permission. But what made you do it?
I think it was honestly, and I think what's still driving it is jealousy. So yeah, I mean, I know that sounds really petty, but like being on Grommr, Instagram, and seeing people like, okay, I'm going to start gaining, or they're new to the community, and like just blowing up overnight. It seems like they post a picture in the month of June, and then by July, they're over 300 pounds. And it's like, there's a jealousy factor that rises up in me. And I'm like, how did they do that? Why can't I grow like that? Why can't I achieve that? I'm like, and then I get mad, and that just inspires me to like, okay, I obviously this means something. If I'm getting jealous of watching somebody else get bigger, it means that that's what I'm supposed to be doing, you know?
That almost ties in with this like uniquely gay experience where you do genuinely turn around looking at some guys like, do I want to fuck you or do I want to be you? And sometimes it's both, but sometimes it's one or the other. And sometimes you are looking at that one person going, I don't know which is which. And it's very confusing. And then, sometimes when it is tied in with the sexual element, we can feel a little uncomfortable or a little uncertain of ourselves as regard to it. So there are those elements, and I can understand when people feel an uncertainty, right, with their gaining journey, with making that decision that can be the thing that holds them back. For me, I see my experience as very lucky because my experience meant that I woke up from a dream and went straight into doing it. I didn't have to think, I just went into it. So my impetus was a blessing in that regard, Not everyone has that. And I think for me, what really cinched it was knowing that I had a decision to make. When I woke up, I could have decided to ignore it or go, that was a hot dream, and then had another wank, or I could have done anything else with it. But what I did do was the moment I had the desire in my head, I enacted on it. I enacted on this thing that wasn't necessarily touching my penis and having a sexual moment. It was touching another part of myself, which was hand to mouth. It was engaging in this visceral element of gainer sexuality that's inherently non-genitalia. It engaged another form of myself, and I think that was what did it. I preferenced another part of myself. And I think as well as men, I can't speak to sex addiction. I can't speak to like the history of wanking and like everything else that goes on.
The history of wanking.
It's like, do people wank more? Like, oh yes, back in the 1800s.
The masturbation museum, I could just...
Oh my god, the natural history of masturbation.
Oh god, even when we were Neanderthals, we were jerking off.
I don't know, but it's like that comment of like, are we overly sexed now? How we engage in sexuality? Like, I don't think we can speak to that, right? If any sexologists or verified clinicians are listening to this and can speak to it, please reach out. We'd love to have
you. If Dr. Ruth were still alive, we could have asked her.
That would be fantastic. Yeah. But until such a time, we cannot know. All I know is, for me, my impetus was deciding in that moment to disengage from the pure fantasy wherein which I had the idea and then would touch my penis, and that would be the connection of sex. Transforming it to connecting the idea in my head to the engagement with my mouth. and making sure that that was the constant reframing and repositioning. Because the more I did that, food in mouth, the more my waistline has grown. And it's been that kind of like push and pull balance, or I guess in the case of my penis, pull and pull balance. Anyways. So that's how I understand it, at least for me. And perhaps for you, dear listener, that's also your moment. It's knowing when are you just going to stop, kind of, not to be all punny about it, but literally toying around with the idea and actually just getting in there and doing it. Sometimes it is just the decision. I think many folks in the community really communicate that their turning point was an instance like that about permission. Do you feel like permission is key for everyone?
Yeah, and it's giving yourself permission to do it, because we talked ad nauseum about how society views fat people being overweight and being happy with being overweight. The society does not want you to be happy and be having lots of sex if you're overweight. They want you to be miserable, starving yourself, and ragingly insecure. So when you finally give yourself permission to be like, fuck it, I don't care. Why do I care what other people think? How is it? It's not going to pay any of my bills. It's not going to take anything away from me for people to think negative about me. It just is what it is. And this is what I want to do to make me happy. That's what you have to do, is tell yourself this, that this makes you happy. And even if you're not a gainer, if you're an encourager or just an admirer, belly enthusiast, whatever, give yourself permission to be okay with what you're into. It'll open up a whole world of possibilities to you.
Well, that then brings in the question, not just the permission of engaging, but the permission to even enjoy it. I think we can all relate to an experience of when we first discovered our queerness and our homosexuality. I know for me, I was a born-again Christian teenager jerking off. And I would literally, I can reflect on this, like having a wank first thing in the morning, looking at fat boy photos at the age of like 16, 17, and like walking with my school uniform on, with my backpack on, going, hey God, it's me again. I'm really sorry. I need to repent for this. I know it's bad. I'm trying to stop. I just don't know how. And having this real, I would enjoy it in the moment, and then there was a shame afterwards. And I think as well, we can relate to that. We see certain people who throw themselves into gaining very quickly, and they see some really immediate result, and then they freak out, and then they run away. Or people who throw themselves into it, they see some result, and they love it until, because of their rapid growth, they have a health problem, and then they freak out, and then they run away. And I think sometimes there's that question of like, there should be a permission to enjoy it. There's permission to own it in its full extent. Do you believe that exists for all people, or is that like, depends on the person?
I mean, I think it depends on the person. If you're waiting around for the world to give you permission, it's not going to happen. There are $2 billion industries that work overtime to make you hate yourself. So don't wait for the world to do it. But I do think it is important and in fact intrinsic to enjoying a fetish and exploring it and relieving yourself of that shame.
So here's a question for you. Do you feel like you were engaging in the gaining journey before that moment of like impetus of permission? Or was it that moment of permission that made you start the gaining journey?
That's what made me start the gaining journey. I mean, I've been a part of the community, quote unquote, since I was 18, and it was as a lurker to begin with, then it was a bloater, then it was strictly encouraging and admiring. And then finally, at, like I said, 34, I was like, no, this is my destiny. This is what I want to do. This is who I want to be and everything. And I feel like everything was kind of a perfect storm because I was getting out of a bad relationship. I was truly establishing independence for the first time because I had never lived on my own. I had always lived with either parents or partners. So this was me living on my own, doing things my own way, not asking for anyone's permission before I did anything. And I think that's what gave me the ability to say, okay, Tim, this is what you want. Just so fucking go for it. You've been waiting for it for years, decades at this point. So what are you waiting for? Just do it.
But let me ask you a controversial one. Permission to lose weight. So we as a community, and I feel like we see this a lot. Now, I get it. We're gainers. We love to gain. We're here for fatness. We're here for growth. We're here for that kind of progression. Of course, the concept of weight loss can be triggering for some people. Perhaps it's not the thing that we want to see at the top of our newsfeed. But regardless, some people do lose weight, either for reasons to do with their health or their personal preferences or any number of reasons. But permission to lose weight. I suspect that there are certain people in this community, because I feel like we have seen posts from people who have alluded to this, that if they felt like they could exist at a smaller weight, they would do. But the nature of growth and obsession with growth in our community obliges them to continue to grow in order to continue to have engagement with people.
Which is such a double standard. It's such a double standard because, you can't on one hand be like, oh, I want to be big, and so I'm going to be that, and I want everyone else to be big, and it's this form of social anarchy, and damn the man, and fuck your beauty standards, and blah 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 blah, and everyone should be chubby. No, there are some people that, like, I have met many an encourager that never wants to gain weight, and I have no issue with that at all, because they're into me, and they're, that's, I don't need anything else after that. But like this idea that if a person puts on a lot of weight and then they decide this isn't exactly what I want to look like, I didn't think the weight would distribute this way, my back is hurting, my knees are hurting, I'm on the cusp of diabetes, I don't want to have that continue because that could lead to more health problems, I don't want to have a limb amputated eventually. Like, you can't shit on people for wanting to be healthy. Like, you can be healthy at many different sizes. And even aside from health, just aesthetics. How can you look at someone else and say, I don't think that you should look the way that you want to look. I think you should look the way I want you to look. How fucked up is that?
It's also worth noting, and we know this to be true, like the more that you lose and gain weight, as you regain weight, it will redistribute differently. Typically speaking, it will come on softer and softer. So you find that a lot of people who want that kind of softer fat, they're on a longer theoretical journey because they have to gain and then lose and then gain and lose and gain and lose. And do all this kind of stuff. But also, like you said, there's more to the narrative than just getting fat. To my mind, gaining, and I've said this before, gaining to me is about gaining perspective. It's about gaining proximity to the body and the life that you want. I think absolutely yes, with a focus on weight gain and fatness, because that is countercultural. It is the one that doesn't get enough love and get enough shine. But similarly, we're all old enough, big enough, and mature enough, and ugly enough to acknowledge that sometimes that is not the right choice for someone. And we're not necessarily talking about health. Sometimes it is health. And that's a decision for the individual to make. Not for you, not for anyone else to make. Because if we start commenting on people's health, then we're no different than the fuckers on the street being like, fatty, don't eat so much junk food, you piece of shit. Like, that's not cool. Similarly, when we shame people for wanting to lose weight for their own reasons, that's not cool. If we really want people to gain weight for socially acceptable reasons and for positive reasons, the best thing we can do is offer a community of love and support. A community that says no matter what you decide to do, we're going to be here to love you. Especially if you gain weight, especially if you grow into the body that is more right for you. Because it's that love and support from people that has really encouraged my growth more than any other. Because we seem to forget this. If the community didn't exist, right? Get rid of Grommr, get rid of the internet. You don't know any gainers in real life, do you? None that are easily accessible to you, unless you happen to stumble upon one. So that means you've got to go through your entire civilian life with no gaining support in the world. Do you reckon any number of people are still going to get to 300, 400, 500 plus pounds? No! We rely on that. So, I don't know, there is something to permission that we give ourselves to live in the body that's right for us, whether it's up or down. There's permission that we grant socially to people to own that, but also to feel safe to share that expression with us. I want to wrap this up and ask you, where do you think that leaves us in the question on permission? To me, it's how can we better support people? How can we better grant that social permission? How can we better hold people and love on people and encourage people to grant themselves permission to start their gaining journeys, or encourage people to own their own sense of self-permission within the community to lose weight if that's necessary to them? How do we do it?
Stop and ask yourself, would you want someone to say this to you? Like, would you want someone to tell you that you were doing it wrong, or that you didn't look right, or that you should be doing this? Like, if you wouldn't want to hear that from someone else, don't say it to someone else, because you know how that affects you. Like, I'm a confident person, but I still have insecurities because I'm not perfect. I never will be. I'm always going to have insecurities. And if someone, says something that's going to tick off one of those boxes the wrong way, they could end up making me feel like crap about myself for a while. And why inflict emotional pain on someone when you can avoid it? It's all supposed to be about, like, we are our tribe, right? Like, this is our community. This is what we have. We have to rely on each other because the world's not going to do anything for us. Society's not going to, like, the beauty industry and the fitness industry are working overtime to make you feel like you're a piece of shit. And even if you achieved what Hollywood, I guess, would call perfect, you're still going to feel like crap about yourself most of the time. Like, A-list movie stars feel like shit about themselves. Bodybuilders, underwear models, they all talk about their insecurities. So just realize that you're speaking to another human being who has their own hangups, and maybe rethink the way that you're going to say something.
Yeah.
Or the way you're going to approach something. And I realize too that sometimes a lot of confusion comes when English is not the person's first language, but like, just do a little bit of research, like etiquette. That's what I'm trying to get to. Etiquette.
Etiquette's a good word. I feel like the sum total of it is, what is your motivation when you have a relationship with someone? Do you care about them for them, or do you care about them for you? Because if you care about them for you, then you probably are going to be the type of person who goes, I will take every piece of your day. I will take your energy. I will take your efforts. I will take all of it for me, because that's what's most important. But when we have a relationship with someone where we invest in other people, the focal point comes back to what's right for them. And sometimes what's right for someone else may not be what we think is right. But that's how we be the best friend, is by supporting them when they need it. But I think that wraps up our episode for today. Tim, I always love having little chit-chats with you.
As do I.
Little tete-a-tetes. Or because you're
little
fat.
kikis.
Because you're fat, you got bitch tits, a little tit-a-tits.
I'm an 8-cup still.
She's an 8-cup girl, goddamn. Well, she's getting there, and that's what matters. But that's a wrap for now here on Thicc Radio. Please remember to like and subscribe, rate us 5 stars, and leave a good review. If you like this episode, the podcast, or just us in general, share it with your friends and encourage them to tune in. You can find me on Instagram at stannnum.
And you can find me on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and TikTok at ThiccyMouse. You can also look us up on TikTok at Thicc Radio, or our website at www.podpage.com/Thicc Radio. And if you want to submit any questions or ideas for episodes, you can reach us at thiccradio@gmail.com. So until next time, bye, Fats.
Bye, Fats.
Let's talk about it.
Thicc Radio is a Patreon and Enter app podcast produced by Stannnum and Thiccy Mouse.
Mixed and mastered by stannnum.
Our artwork is provided by Lokitu.
Our theme song is provided by Spotify.